It's not often that a book actually makes me cry, but this one did. I've just finished reading the debut novel by Monique Mulligan called Wherever You Go. She's a West Australian writer, she's also a journalist, reviewer, and she's a kids author, but this is her first debut novel. And Wherever You Go is such an amazing story. I had to get her on my show. So sit down, let's get to know Monique Mulligan and the story behind her debut novel, Wherever You Go, and find out why it was such a moving and impactful story for me. Monique Mulligan, thank you so much for coming on my show. I'm excited to talk to you. How are you going?
I'm good, Josh. How about you?
I'm great. Now, look, I was on your show for Stories on Stage a few months ago. Now I get to
Yeah.
have you on my show. So this is pretty exciting. And what I'm really excited about is the fact that you're talking about your brand new debut novel, Wherever You Go. That must be pretty exciting that you've to actually have this book out there now.
Yeah,
Almost out
it
there.
really almost out there. We've got, as we're recording, we're a couple of weeks out, but yeah, I'm super excited because it just seemed like it was never going to happen, and now I've got it. Like I have it. It's here, and people are starting to read
Can
it,
you hold it?
and
Can you hold it up again for me and just sort of give it a bit of a flick through? That's a big book.
yeah, it is. Yeah,
It's a big book because I was
and it's
lucky enough
always
to read the advanced reader copy, which was
yeah,
a PDF, and
yeah.
I was looking at the amount of pages in it, and normally I'm not a big reader of big books, and I didn't realize how big it was until I'm about halfway through. I go, wow, there's still more to go. This is exciting, but I reckon it's to read to write such a big book. How many pages? About 300 and
It's about 348.
348.
Yeah.
Were there had you written more and you had to cull back?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
you're on a
In
roll.
the first read, like the first draft had about 110,000 words, and I was fairly confident with that first draft. I'd been told it was very clean. It was really, it read really well. I had a great story, and then I sent it to an agent, and it got rejected. But it was actually a really nice, helpful rejection. She wanted to see it again. She wanted me to do some cutting and changing and so on. And so over the last 4 years, it's gone through lots and lots of, different changes. And I was looking through the outtakes the other day, and there's probably about, 7,000 words of outtakes that I've got just in case they're useful for something else one day.
You so I was going to say because the whole process for you has been quite emotional as well, hasn't it? Because obviously, being your baby, being the first debut novel, this is one you've been passionate about and you've invested so much in. How did you go when you got the feedback from the agent? How did that go?
It was a really interesting time because I was overseas actually. I'd gone away on a writing retreat. I was hosting it I was then with Serenity Press, and so I knew that the agent had this book and that she'd said, she's loving it so far and she wanted to see the rest of the manuscript and she was really into it. So I kind of had that little bit of excitement behind me because you hear stories from other writers and they're saying, I sent it off and like straight away I had this big deal and I had like every publishing house in the world wanted to publish my book and movie
Mm,
deals. And so, kind of in my mind, the wheels are turning. I'm like, I wonder what might happen here, and then I got this feedback from her and I was too busy to really take it in. So it's like, oh, okay, no worries, like not yet. Obviously there's a bit of work to be done. It wasn't until I got on the plane to come home that I sort of went, it's not ready yet. I have
mm.
to do more work on this, And that's when it really started to sink in that this was like, I knew it was hard, but I don't think you really know how hard it is until you're doing it. You have
Yeah.
to go through that process to appreciate it.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
exactly. And it's sort of like because you think, oh God, I've got to do more work on it. Oh geez, I thought it was fine the way it was. But the whole idea
Yeah.
is that the agent or the editor and all that, they bring in
Yeah.
such a different angle and and they bring the reader perspective into it. Like, what's the reader going to
Yeah.
get out of this? And I think that is the brilliant way of doing it because you as the author sit in yourself for so long, you sit with the book for so long,
Yeah.
it's almost like you got tunnel vision. But when someone
Yeah.
else has a read and they can see the possibility and they can lift your work up to an even better degree or standard, whatever you want to call it, and then that makes it a collaborative effort. I mean, that's what I find with writing kids' books. I mean, I know you're a kids' author as well, so you found that having the editor or someone else look at it and go, "This is awesome, but how can we make it better? Let's do this, this, and this." So therefore, you then had to go back and revisit the manuscript. And how was that process?
Um, she gave me some really good ideas. She suggested having a little bit more of an ensemble cast, and she suggested she just felt that some of the layers needed to be deepened. And the thing is, like, I didn't end up with that agent. She then turned it down again a second time and just said she couldn't put a finger on it. It just wasn't quite ready yet. And I'm like, well, if you don't know what's wrong with it, like, how do I know what's wrong with it? um, the, the beautiful thing about going through that process, though, was that each time I did, I realized I was actually really close, because they all took the time to give me this feedback. And what it ended up amounting to was that the book was missing enough conflict. And being less experienced in that process, I'm thinking, what do you mean? Like, I knew exactly what happened in this story. These people, their marriage is put through the ringer. What do you mean it hasn't got enough conflict in it? And what I had to learn over 4 years and then working with a really tough editor was that I'd worked in dramatic tension, but that's not quite the same thing. So I had to learn to really draw out the conflict, the inner conflict and the external conflict in every scene. And I had to make every character work, and the points of view earn their place. And that was a tough and long process.
And I tell you what, it worked. That really did work, because that's
Thank
something
you.
that I took away from the book. I'll talk about that in a minute, actually. But can you just give us an overall thumbnail sketch? What is Wherever You Go? What's about?
What's it about? Okay, so it's about a couple who experienced an unimaginable tragedy. And as the story opens, they're moving into this town, this small town in Western Australia. They're ready to have this new start and see if they can salvage their marriage. And they're both coming in with different goals, of course. One of them is thinking, we've got a fresh start. I think we can save this marriage if we really work at it. A new place might give us some different perspective. And the other one's thinking, I'm so glad to be away from everything that I knew and where everyone knew me and knew my story. And I'll just hide in this little town here for a while. So you have that sort of opening, and then the story, of course, they're thrust into this situation where their marriage is tested even more, because Amy, the main female character, she opens a cafe and becomes consumed by work, by suddenly it distracts her from everything she doesn't want to think about. So she's cooking, she's front of house in this suddenly popular cafe, but she's making friends and making maybe some not so good friends and that kind of thing as well. So there's a lot happening. But ultimately it's that story of that marriage, and will it survive the loss it's had and the directions that these two characters are going in.
Can I mention the loss?
Yeah. You can. There's an extra dimension to that we might keep quiet, but let's mention the first part.
Okay, because that's what got me.
Yeah.
Is I'm reading the book, and I'm reading the interaction between Amy, the main female character, and then you've got Matt, which is her husband. And I'm reading these interactions, and this is where it goes back to what you're talking about before with writing the conflict within these characters and bringing that internal conflict out. And I'm reading this, and I'm tell you, to be honest, Amy, I didn't like her in the beginning. I'm thinking, what's wrong with Amy? She's emotional, she's reactive. There's so many layers happening with Amy, and I wasn't relating. And as I got deeper into the story, and what Amy and Matt were dealing with was the trauma of grief, can I say, of losing a
Yeah,
child. Okay.
yeah,
And that is such a universal theme right across the world, where it's every parent's worst fear is having their
yeah.
child pass away. And
Mm,
and obviously the different situations around that would exasperate it and bring in more emotional elements. But just the core idea of losing a child. And what I
mm,
was reading, because you have written that beautifully, is that the trauma that the both parents were experiencing in their own different way and how they were reacting with each other.
yeah,
And
yeah,
that's where the big conflict was. And I was struggling reading that, only because it reminded me of what my parents went through, because they
mm,
lost a child when their son was about 2 months old, and they never spoke about it. This was in the early 70s, and there was no grief counseling. You didn't burden anybody with the idea that, oh, my child's passed away, and
yeah,
you buried that stuff, and that can only
mm,
manifest as anger, denial, grief, frustration, all these other things, and all these guilt things that come up. And that's what was coming up through your main characters. And that's what I
mm,
found really challenging. And I think you're going to get so many women reading your book, mothers going, I can really identify with this, or this is something that I don't want to happen, but I can really connect with. And so I
yeah,
think with that main baseline of the story going through of the
mm,
grief and how Matt and Amy deal with that grief, I think
mm.
you've nailed that enough to me to go, whoa, this is what was reacting in me. So well done, Monique, in doing that. So have you had much feedback about that aspect of the book?
I have, and thanks for saying that. It's really it's really affirming to hear from somebody, you know, that they felt something personally about it, and yeah, it means so much to me that to get that feedback. I have had feedback from a few different, obviously some authors who've read the book and given me endorsements, and they've said much the same thing. I have another couple of male readers who very much connected with the book and said what what they particularly liked was how deeply the male character Matt was drawn in the
Yes,
story,
yes.
because I worked really hard on Matt, on wanting to make him. Like the first version of Matt, he was really saintly.
Mm,
He was just really, really like that, all suffering, like putting up with all kinds of rubbish from Amy. And she's never nasty, really, but she's just self-absorbed because she's so
mm.
caught up in her grief, and she can't see that he needs to grieve, and so he's going through this process of incomplete grief for
Yeah,
him.
and I thought that was really interesting, the way you wrote Matt and the way you
Yeah.
made him go through all these different things, and
Mm.
because I saw that within my own family. So the way and you acknowledged the male figure and what he goes through, and I
Yeah.
thought that was really really good the way you did that, and thank you for that, for giving the male character that story as well. So it's not all just about the wife or the mother;
Yeah.
it's about the husband as well.
Yeah, yeah. It was really important to me because, you know, regardless of who's in that relationship, they both have so many feelings and so much to go through. And I've seen it in my own life. I've seen it in other people's lives of, you know, one person carrying the other through really difficult circumstances and never being able to actually to deal with their own losses or pains or anything like that. So for me, actually, I came to this realization yesterday that was really eye-opening for me, and I thought, oh my gosh, Matt's character arc mirrors my sort of life, say 15 years ago.
Oh wow.
Really, like a very different story,
Yeah, yeah.
um, and but 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 there's that element of Matt in his putting himself aside to deal with someone else's pain and issues, um, and having to do that for a really long time until finally, you know, you're faced with this what am I going to do moment.
Mm.
And what an amazing realization to realize after I've actually written the book. I just go, oh, I think I'm actually more like Matt.
That is really interesting, though. I reckon a lot of people will be able to identify with Matt's character in that holding up someone else for so long to their own detriment, where they haven't acknowledged what they need to go through. And yeah, I think a lot of people can relate to that. So, why did you pick such an emotionally charged topic to write about? I mean, of
Oh,
all the
that's so,
things you could have written
yeah,
about,
I
Monique,
know.
you picked this. What was why?
I know. I mean, the thing was, I started with this idea. I remember thinking about these people who wanted to have a simple life, and I think that's coming from like my own, well, at the time, I had a house full of teenagers. There were four of them in the house, and so definitely those thoughts of having a simpler life, out of the country, that kind of thing, were really getting quite appealing at the time. Um, and then I saw this story, newspaper story. It was quite a big story at the time of a family who went through something similar to what Amy and Matt do. Um, and they were a couple in this country. They lost almost all of their children in
Oh,
one go.
yeah.
So I remember thinking about that, and you sort of like comparing that to having this house full of kids, and so I think the numbers were the same. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, what if I lost all of my children in one go? What if something absolutely unimaginable? Like, how do you bounce back from that? How does a
You,
couple
you don't bounce
recover?
back from it, yeah.
And yeah, and some couples, they seem to, like, the statistics show that they don't, that many of them just don't make it because it's too much. And then there's
Mm.
others who somehow manage to get through. And I thought, that's what I'm going to write about. I'm going to write about this couple, and I don't know when I'm writing if they're going to make it or not.
Wow. So you didn't know that
But
when you're writing, you just let it see where it went.
I'll let it happen. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow.
Mm.
Okay. I'm not going to give away the end or anything like that. No, you've managed to work into the whole story Amy's
Mm.
passion. She's a chef, but it's
Mhm.
obviously your passion for food. I know you love food and you love baking. You make lots of yummy things and you like wine and all the good things in life. And the fact that you've weaved those elements within the story, I really enjoyed it because it added I suppose, a nice counterbalance to
Yeah.
the heaviness of what else was going on, but also, I just want half the recipes you've got. I know you got some recipes at the end of the book, but there were some other ones. I think it was the Greek night you had that was like, oh, I've got to get my next recipe for that. So
I
it's
wish
going
I
to be
could.
interesting
No,
to see how many people, what people react
yeah.
like for when they read the book
Yeah.
and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's interesting because, as you say, like, I am really passionate about food, and that was another form of inspiration for me. I always knew my book would have food in it, that I wanted to write about food, and I was sharing the other day about how food was um, something that became almost an obsession, not an obsession, but it was just, I actually wanted, like, if I went through this cooking Italian or cooking Greek kick, I really took it on board seriously. So, you'd come to my house, and I'd say, Josh and Andy, come over and have dinner with us, and you'd have your feast, all of that there. I'm not promising that now,
Oh,
but
oh,
it
I'm
would,
cancelling
yeah,
the
yeah,
invitation then.
we'll open that up. But yeah, we sort of, really wanted that to be, well, I wanted that to just, I don't know, experience what it was like to eat foods and feasts, I suppose. I really
Mm.
liked the idea of feasting. I had these romantic notions of having the long table, outside with the fairy lights and the little candles on the table. And it doesn't work at my house because there's this wind tunnel down the side of the house, and so I never
I can, yeah,
quite lived
everyone's
up
hair
to that.
blowing everywhere, and yeah, I can
Yeah,
see.
like, you had the view of the Colorbond fence. It's not the same as the Tuscan Hills, is it, with the golden sunsets?
Maybe not the same, but you can imagine. You can paint it
Yeah,
on the wall.
yeah. So I did my best to kind of bring that in there. So to me, like, you're writing a story like this, there's so much darkness and so much sadness in there. You've got to have the light with it.
Mm.
So I used different ways of doing that through some of the characters that you meet in the story. They certainly bring that lightness in, but the food, those those feasts were meant to kind of just give everyone a bit of a break. from the tears and from the like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
what's going to happen to these guys? Are they going to make it? That question. Just take a break from the question for a while and have some good food.
Look, that worked because that got me hungry while I was reading it. But also,
Yeah.
you've drawn the sense of place so beautifully. Look,
Mhm.
it's the town of Blackwood that you call Blackwood. Can I say
Mhm.
what it's based on?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
based
It's
on
so
Bridgetown, but
yeah.
you have painted Bridgetown so well. And I mean,
Mhm.
obviously, I go to Bridgetown quite often. You love Bridgetown. Why are you drawn to it so much?
That's a really good question too. I think it was a really nice place for us to escape to from the dealing with four teenagers in the house at that particular time. Because when I did that first draft, that was my life. It was
Mm,
always writing in the gaps and with noise all around and lots of hustle and bustle. And so going to Bridgetown that the first time was just really like, let's check out this town. And we went, oh, this is really nice. And then I thought, this could make a really good setting. So we went down again and I spent a weekend walking around the streets with a camera and created a mood board with photos of old houses and, the shops and things like that. And went back another time and talked to people there about, what it's like living there and just slowly built up that impression of the town in different seasons. And I don't know.
well, you,
There's just something you just know when you find a place that
mm.
there's lots of pretty places in the world, but I don't think all of them you feel like you could live in. And Bridgetown was that for me. Like I could move there tomorrow. Yeah.
Well, why don't you? It is a stunning part of the world, and the way you've painted it. I mean, the thing is, when I was in Bridgetown last time,
Yeah.
I actually sent you a photo of one of the cafes here and said,
Yeah.
is this based on in the book? Is this the one?" And you went,
Yeah.
"No." Oh, it's part of it. I think you said you've created this cafe that Amy opens. I've got
Yeah.
to remember now. Brewed to Taste is the name of the
Yes.
cafe that she opens.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
a hodgepodge of all these other fabulous food places you've been to, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. I suppose when I went down there, the cafes that were there at the time were really quite small. And I do remember there was one like right at the start of the book, she mentions going to this quaint little cafe and it had little, doilies and things like that. So I remember seeing something like that. I think it's
Mm.
gone now. But
And the
I wanted
doilies are
something,
gone too, hopefully.
yeah, I think so. I think I wanted something a bit funkier and a bit,
Mm.
I suppose a bit more modern, but not something that would keep all the locals out. Just something that had that warm and inviting feel. So I
Yep.
kind of amalgamated a whole lot of different places I've been to and said, right, we're going to put this here in this main street, which is why you kind of changed the name of the town because they're going to look at it and they're going to go, the bakery doesn't look like that. Like I made a really fancy bakery. That's the kind of bakery I like to go to, but the bakery in Bridgetown was not like that. So,
No, no. But they do
no,
have good pies, though.
they definitely have good stuff in there. The quality is fine. It's just that the look of it is very different.
Yeah, it's a purpose built building. Get in, get your sandwich, and get out again.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
Now, Monique, what do you want people to take away from wherever you go when they read it? What do you want them to feel afterwards?
It's hard because different people are going to feel different things, aren't they? If they've been through something like this, they could feel like completely wrung out, and they could be thinking, no, I wouldn't have acted in, or I didn't act in that way. And I think that's what's really interesting about this is that there are so many different ways that we experience grief. So I think that's one thing I'd like people to take away is understanding that there is no one way. We often like to measure people's grief and say, well, that's how I do it. Gee, she's coping really, really well, isn't she? Oh, I'd be a mess if it was me.
Mm,
And it's grief is not like that. It doesn't go to this linear, like there's definitely different stages of grief, but you're not always just going, oh, I'm going to go like this or something like that.
yeah.
You just you can walk past a photo and just burst into tears, and the next day walk past the same photo and say, hi, how are you today? And
Mm,
grief is just this. sort of almost indefinable things. I want people to know that. There's two other things. One is that I hope they do feel a little bit hungry actually, because that tells me I did that job well. So,
Yes, you've done it well.
yeah, yeah. And the other thing is that the idea of wherever you go, which is where the title comes from. There's a quote early on in the book that's by Jon Kabat-Zinn, and it's wherever you go, there you are.
Yeah.
And that quote was something that was said to someone in my life many years ago, to remind that person that you can keep on running, and you can take yourself wherever you can go. You can climb a mountain, you can go and uproot and live in a different town, but you're always going to take yourself with you. And it doesn't matter what
and
you
all your
try to
issues
bury
and all your
yourself in.
problems.
Wow. And people sometimes, we all like to do it. We say, I'm going to move down here and everything will be better or all right, or, you know, no one will know this about me. And to some degree that might hold true, but you always, it always comes out in the end, whether it's like privately or in public, you know, that you-ness is always with you. So
Yeah,
that's probably that.
that is a brilliant takeaway from the book, actually, because that's the whole underlying thing. It's you have to work on yourself no matter where you are. And I'm going to admit that as a guy, I cried at several points in the book. And I know that whoever's going to read it, they're going to have lots of people reading it, and there are going to be some key points in there. They're just going to burst into tears. And I'm even thinking about a certain scene. I won't say anything because I want people to read it and get to it, and then they'll have little tears themselves. But look, congratulations on such an awesome book. And I'm going to, and it's such also a unique kind of West Australian feel about it too, even though the themes are universal. And you've got a bit of an international kind of thing there. It is such a West Australian feel with obviously with Bridgetown, with a bit of the FIFO stuff happening in there. And you mentioned Bunbury, and I think a lot of people around the area are just going to be so overjoyed to see themselves or see their places written in a book. So I think that's pretty awesome as well. So what events have you got coming up to launch the book?
I've got an official launch. I'm fortunate enough that we can have a face-to-face launch at my place of work, and so quite a few people are coming along to that, and we'll be social distancing and all of that, but there'll be some food and some wine to just celebrate, you know, the book, a little bit of a get together. So that's one thing in September 18th, that'll be happening. And then I've got an online launch as well with a friend of mine who is an ABC producer, and she and I are going to just have a chat and, you know, talk about being friends for 30 years, but also, like, you know, writing a book in the meantime. I've got some podcasts coming up. I've got a bookshop that I'm going to go and talk at, and a library I'm talking at. So,
which is the bookshop one?
Going to Dymocks and Busselton.
Excellent.
And also going to Bridgetown Library. So I'll be chatting there as well. And Kalamunda Library. So they're, you know, West Australian.
Will you have a full list of all the events on your website?
I will be updating that, yes.
Excellent. Okay. What I'll do is I'll put your website at the bottom here, so people can go and they can actually go find your book through the website, and they can go and find out where your events are through the website as well. Yeah. Now, one last question I ask everyone, Monique, is what's the most important thing in life to focus on or to remember?
Focus on or to remember. Oh, that's one of those questions I could talk about for ages. Like, I should have prepared.
I know, we don't have that much time though, Monique.
Right, okay. Like, I like to focus on kindness and on people around me, and just on being just accepting that we are all different. We are all going through things. We don't know what they are, and trying not to judge people, but just be kind to them anyway. And to me, that's just something I try to live by and try to keep in my mind as much as possible in what I'm doing. Just see that good in people and in situations.
Oh, look, you can't go past basic kindness. And as you said, don't judge people. That is so much needed in the world today. And Look, thank you, Monique. Look, good luck with the success of this book, wherever you go. I think it's going to be awesome, and you're going to be going everywhere with it. So thank you very much, and congratulations.
Thank you so much. And thanks for your time today and for all the lovely things you've said. You really made my day.
Well, that's great. Thank you, Monique. We'll chat again soon.
Okay.
Hi, thank you very much for watching the latest episode of Josh Langley Gets to Know. Got any questions? Whether you want to say whether you liked it, you didn't like the interview, and like my hair's too grey or something like that, post a comment below. I won't get upset, okay? Now, gratuitous plug here. If you want to grab my books, Being You Is Enough, Okay to Feel the Way You Do, or Magnificent Mistakes, or all three, just go to my website at joshlangley.com.au, because it's about trying to change the world one book at a time, helping one kid just to feel good about who they are and feel good in their own skin. If we can just help one child, then they may help another child, then another one, then another one, and then that's how we slowly change the world. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you next episode.